The stage lights were warm, the kind that make even tired faces look hopeful. The man in the chair adjusted a tie so loud it looked like it could have been stolen from a sofa. He grinned like someone who had survived both applause and criticism and learned to laugh at both. He had spent a lifetime in stories. Once he had played spies and heroes, and now he was lending his voice to creatures that couldn't even fly. Penguins, of all things, dancing penguins. The world, he often said, was a strange place. One week you're dodging imaginary explosions in a suit, the next you're arguing with a cartoon bird about rhythm. And yet, the birds were winning. Families were lining up to watch little black and white creatures shuffle, sing, and discover who they were. He didn't mind losing to them. There were worse ways to be beaten at the box office than by happiness with flippers. He talked about penguins the way some people talk about old friends. How they wobble like they've borrowed their walk from silent film comedians. How they are clumsy on land but turn into living poetry underwater. How they fall in love, stay together, at least until someone more interesting swims by, and how size doesn't matter when confidence does. He liked the smaller ones best. He said small creatures always needed bigger personalities, louder voices, and more attitude, otherwise the world would never notice them. That's why, in the film, he gave one penguin the voice of a dramatic romantic, and another the voice of a smooth talker who thought every sentence should sound like a love song. Between them, they didn't just sing, they announced themselves to the universe. He often joked that someday even politics would become a talent show. Candidates wouldn't debate, they'd sing. If you couldn't hold a note, you couldn't hold office. He imagined serious people suddenly forced to perform country songs or dance routines, and the thought alone made him laugh. But behind the jokes, he was a man who watched the world closely. He had opinions about leaders, about wars, about how often confidence was mistaken for wisdom. He believed that big words were sometimes used to hide small ideas. He believed that when people couldn't explain something simply, they often didn't understand it at all. He also believed in bicycles. Riding was his meditation, over bridges, along long roads, into the wind, sometimes 20 miles, sometimes 50. The road didn't care who you were, it only cared if you kept moving. He admired a famous cyclist who had beaten illness and gravity and suspicion, a man who kept being accused, tested, doubted, and still rode on. If survival were a crime, he once said, half of humanity would be in jail. He laughed at the human body, too, called it the strangest design ever approved. Who, he liked to ask, puts a waste system next to a playground? He said if humans were a product, they'd be recalled. But the laughter wasn't hiding anything anymore. He spoke openly about the years when he tried to solve everything with a bottle, how it never solved anything, how it only made him lower his standards faster than he could break them. Recovery had taught him something simple and difficult, that some doors must stay closed forever, because behind them is only a field, a bad decision, and a confused animal wondering how it got involved. He didn't pretend temptation vanished. He said it waits patiently, but now he knew how to walk past it. And then there were the stories that hurt and healed at the same time. He once visited a friend who had suffered a terrible accident, a man who had lost nearly everything except his sense of humor. Instead of bringing pity, he brought laughter, dressed in a ridiculous costume, speaking nonsense, and performing an imaginary examination so absurd it forced a real, honest laugh out of a man who desperately needed one. He believed laughter wasn't denial. He believed it was resistance. That friend was gone now. So was his wife. But their children carried their light forward, and that, he said, was how stories really survived. In the end, he looked around and shrugged. Movies came and went. Hits and failures traded places. Sometimes spies won. Sometimes penguins did. But the real victory, he thought, was simpler. To still be standing. To still be laughing. To still be riding forward. To still be telling stories. And somewhere, in a cold, imaginary ocean, a small penguin was dancing badly and proving that even the strangest voices deserve to be heard.